it looks like, we can't be certain, so I don't want to put the fear of God into those of you who rely on trains, but if the usual rules are followed, train fares are going to get at least a 4.8% increase. That's because it's linked to RPI and the July RPI. And when I saw this, I thought, oh yeah, okay, so everyone's, or the government anyway, are really worried about people not going back into the cities. We're all being told to get out of the cars. And I think, going back to our opening subject, something like 74% of transport carbon emissions come from cars currently. And therefore, the answer seems to be charge us more to go on the trains. Not sure I can see where this is going. So to help me through this interesting development is Baroness Natalie Bennett, of course, former leader of the Green Party, now a member of the House of Lords. So, Natalie, it's kind of a bit of an open door for you, but I'll try not to let you get away with it too easily. This does seem a bit bonkers, though, doesn't it?
Well, thanks very much, Nick, for inviting me on to really help put pressure on the government to ensure that this doesn't happen. The current quote from some government source says the government is currently considering a variety of options, and it's very obvious the option that it should take is that rail fares shouldn't go up at all. They are currently at astronomical levels already. They price many people into their cars, which of course, as you identify in the climate emergency, is the last thing that we should be doing. What we need to do is, particularly after COVID, and lots of people understandably through the pandemic have tended to move towards cars and private transport, but we really have to get public transport fired up again, and this would be obviously absolutely the wrong thing to do.
The thing I've got a problem with it, and I cards on the table. I don't think I've ever said words like this before, but I completely agree with you on this subject. But my problem with it, I'm more influenced actually by the need to get people moving and going to work again. And whilst I understand home working, I just think that's a place I don't want to see permanently. I know we're going to see more of it, but actually the problem with travelling at the moment, where my real objection comes to this, is if I had a 4.8% rise, which would make, in my case, travelling from Bishop Stortford to London on a daily basis, that's adding taking the bill up to about 35 quid just to get there and back during peak times. I have to stand, and over the UK, on average, 17% of commuter services are with people standing. I don't want to pay for the privilege of being herded into a train. And for me, that's the grounds not paying the rise. But equally, you want to get more people back on trains. We don't have the capacity, do we, to do that? And therefore, which has got to come first? More trains or just trying to shovel people back into carriages?
Well, I think this is where perhaps we may part company, so we can't have too much agreement this evening, I'm sure. That I think working from home and indeed reshaping our economy so it's far less centred on the big city, particularly on London, but also on all of the big centres. What we need for government talks about levelling up. I prefer to talk about spreading out. We need to spread out the prosperity of our economy. People commuting long distances on average compared to the rest of Europe. We had pre-COVID double the average commuting time. That's not healthy for anybody. What we want to do is to enable people to work much closer to where they live. The ideal is the 15-minute city, the 15-minute town where everything you need is within a 15-minute walk or cycle ride. We really need to reshape this economy so it's not built around long-distance commuting. But, when people need to travel, they should be able to afford it. And it shouldn't be a situation where, people look at a train fare for a couple of people costing hundreds and hundreds of pounds and, driving will cost you 30 or 40 pounds. And not everyone even can possibly make a choice in those sort of circumstances. And, we're historically in a really strange situation. If you go back from 1980 to 2010, the cost of motoring fell 14%. Cost of buses went up 58% and rail 63%. And then subsequently on from that, in the decade following, again, buses are up 18%, rails up 4%, driving's down 8%. So what we've seen is a huge balancing away from the public transport we actually need to be using in ways that's just pushing people into cars.
The problem with the train situation at the moment is if we had everyone working from home, and we've already seen this in emergency packages, if you have even a large proportion of people working from home or just going into town less, which I think is probably where we'll end up as it happens, they're all going to be in huge debt. these companies go bankrupt. The money will not actually be able to come in, and that's going to have to come from the public purse. That's just a bill that we can't pick up, can we? So the price of this change is going to end hitting up the taxpayer once again in the pocket. No?
Well, what we need to do is we do need to get people onto the trains, but trains for different kind of reasons. I mean, one of the things is I had a long debate with the rail industry on Twitter, as one does have debates on Twitter, catching a train down from Sheffield and pointing out how few people got on it before the train stopped at Leicester. And if I catch a similar train, say in Germany or France, what you'll find is people get on and off that train at intermediate stops along the way. It's not just people going into London. And that's because the price differentials are such that, you know, I mean, the old phrase, let the train take the strain, it's actually a lot more pleasant to catch the train, if it's financially viable. But at the moment, what we're doing is crunching all of those people into London onto those commuter services. And if we think about the economics, you know, that you were talking about the economics of rail, but we're also looking at economic reshaping in terms of, you know, it's very likely that lots of the, I won't name them, but, you know, the chain stores you can think of that perhaps specialise in prawn sandwiches or similar, they may end up having less stores, but we might see many more coffee shops, and little cafes in towns, communities, small cities up and down the land with people working from home, but, you know, popping out at lunchtime to have a break or popping down to the park where there's a coffee van at lunchtime. This really is a reshaping of our economy.
No, look, I'm not oblivious to that, and provincial towns can benefit from this. I absolutely agree. And if they benefit with it from independence, all the more, you know, great thing. The problem with using the train more is our whole network is really geared pretty much north to south. I mean, you can look at the Pennines and places like that where they have Liverpool, Manchester and so forth. But if you want to take a train and use it, shall we say, more locally, your choices are very limited. It's on the route into London, isn't it? We don't have cross-country rail. That, again, would be a huge investment to achieve what you want to achieve. And I just want to put it to you is, it's now, I think, that British public are beginning to wake up, certainly the government have, to the implied costs of persuading people to go green, haven't they? This could be just yet another bill for the taxpayer or the individual. And I'm not sure we can, to quote your phrase, expect people to take that strain, can we?
Well, I think turning this round the other way, let's look at this at the fact that we actually need, our infrastructure is in a really poor condition. People are forced into their cars. That means we have a huge problem with air pollution, which has massive impacts on public health. Because people are in their cars, they're not even, walking to the bus stop or walking to the train station. We have a huge problem with obesity. Our roads are absolutely congested, and that means that our communities, it's very difficult to build community where there's a huge amount of traffic noise. Older people who perhaps are a bit frail may find it hard to even cross the street, be afraid to cross the street. What we're doing is creating a really, hostile environment in our cities and towns, a really unpleasant environment, an unhealthy environment, literally a deadly environment. So what we're talking about, lots of climate action has what the jargon calls co-benefits, which means as well as, for example, like insulating people's homes, you create lots of jobs and small business opportunities, you reduce our excess winter deaths, which is an absolute disgrace. You give people comfortable homes and cut their fuel bills. So many of these things, as indeed investing in rail and, even more than rail, I'd focus on buses. Local buses are the way that people really get around the community, the way you build community, the way people can spend time with their families, grandparents can visit their grandkids. Buses are really where we start. And going back even before that, short journeys in cities should be by walking and cycling. And all of those things have tremendous co-benefits for public health, for the quality of our communities, for the quality of our life.
Natalie, I opened up, and you wouldn't have heard this, I'm sure, and I opened up and I was talking about the row taking place over Prince Harry sort of calling for climate change action and then jumping on a private jet to go to a polo match, which his defenders say, well, that's great because it was charity, so there's no problem with him doing that. What would you say to Prince Harry about that trip?
Well, what I would focus on is my focus is always not on individual action. My focus is on system change. What we need to do to change the system for everybody is to make it the easiest, simplest and cheapest way to get anywhere is to walk and cycle as a starting point, catch the bus for journeys a bit longer, catch the train for journeys that are a bit longer than that, or a coach. And so what we have to do is focus on the system change. We've got a system where we're trashing the planet and creating a thoroughly miserable society with horrendous levels of poverty, insecurity, inequality, and an epidemic of mental ill health. What we're doing now is very clearly, profoundly not working. We need to change the whole system.
The only thing is, I would say your colleague, and I think it was Jenny Jones, was saying when Alex Sharma got in trouble for flying around for the conference, actually said it is double standards to be telling us to do one thing and not using more video conferencing. And that's really the point I'm making at the moment. I thought it was a politically, we've got to be consistent, haven't we? If we're going to criticise Alex Sharma for it, who's leading the COP26 conference, but let Harry off the hook. Seems hard.
Well, no, as the Green Party, we'd always love to get more airtime. We don't feel like we get a great deal of airtime, given the fact that our politics is clearly changing so quickly. With, for example, we're going to see the first Green ministers in the UK.
You're not answering my question, though, Natalie.
What I'm saying is I'm going to choose to use my airtime to talk about the system change and the way in which we can improve people's lives.
Well, look, I appreciate that, but I think it's fair to answer the question, though. That's what I'm saying. To me, there's a double standard there, and I think the public get fed up when it's not called out on both sides, and also been lectured by people who then don't, and that's not you, by the way, lectured by people who seem to say, do as I say, not as I do, and which is why I'm kind of saying to you, why are you reluctant as a party to have a pop at Prince Harry when, frankly, Alex Sharma was, doing the same thing and did receive the wrath of the Green Party?
But to be absolutely clear and straightforward, my answer to that is that whatever time you give me, I will focus on the need for us to build a different kind of economy, a different kind of society, because that's the really important issue. Caroline Lucas has been promoting, and all of us are promoting, a petition that's got more than 40,000 signatures calling for a well-being economy. So to go like New Zealand has gone, the New Zealand Treasury is guided by a living standards framework that looks at what all of the decisions, what impact they have on poverty, on inequality, on the environment, and on the economy, and look at it as a complete package. And that's the kind of thing we need to say in the UK, and that's what I'll keep talking about.
And you have kept talking very convincingly, so much so that we've run out of time. But thank you for joining me, Baroness Natalie. Oh gosh, I had a total blank then. How could I actually do that? That was totally. But Natalie Benn, thank you very much for joining me.